Cold War was characterized by the Berlin airlift, the raising of the Berlin Wall, and the build-up of two huge armies facing each other off in Europe. At sea, Western and Soviet navies prodded and cajoled one another to test tactics and capabilities. In the air, massive bombing attacks were launched and then called back at the last minute. Each country developed huge arsenals of nuclear rockets and a strategy of mutually assured destruction. In space, satellites were launched to spy on each other's rocket installations and troop movements, and there was huge propaganda and competition around each side's firsts, such as first satellite, first monkey in space, first man in space, and eventually, first man on the moon.
On March 5th, 1953, Joseph Stalin died yielding power to Georgy Malenkov. Winthrop Rockefeller and his wife Barbara are involved in a highly publicized divorce, culminating in 1954 with a record-breaking $5.5 million settlement. Communist Bloc is a group of communist nations dominated by the Soviet Union at this time, probably a reference to the uprising of 1953 in East Germany.
Okay, right after World War II, that was where the bloc, where it became either you're communist or you're, I'm going to say non-communist, or
Western, part of
the Western world. And we're going to take, I think Greece is probably one of the most important ones, because that's where actually the East went against the West. It was a big issue. But right after World War II, what they did was they had two different armies. One was supporting the communist regime. The other one was supporting the Western side, which was, I'm going to say England and the United States. France was really trying to recover. People say that they were a big influence. They weren't. Actually England was probably the biggest. The United States was behind them. And what they did was they won that, and they actually won Greece over to become part of, the Western, and they actually made them from a third world country to, I'm going to say closer to a second world, or
developed country.
We'll call it a developed country.
Rock Around the Clock was a hit single released by Bill Haley and his Comets in May, spurring worldwide interest in rock and roll music. On February 3rd, 1959, Buddy Holly, Ritchie Valens, and the Big Bopper all died in a plane crash that had a devastating effect on the country and youth culture. Here is some recent footage uncovered by our research team.
A long time ago, I can still remember how that music used to make me smile. And I knew if I had my chance that I could make those people dance, and maybe they'd be happy for a while. But February made me shiver with every paper I deliver. Bad news on the doorstep. I couldn't take one more step.
In 1959, Abel and Miss Baker were the first monkeys to return to Earth from space aboard the flight Jupiter AM-18, period. In 1959, the Mafia became the center of attention for the FBI, and the once secret organization began to grow in the public eye.
Say hello to my little friend.
See hula hoops. I remember in the 70s, me and my sister actually had hula hoops. I remember them being made by Wham-O, and we had a couple of hula hoops, and when I lived in Illinois, and we used to use them all the time. I was probably like 4 or 5 years old at the time using them, and actually I remember when we moved from the house, we forgot our hula hoops, and I went back years later to visit my old hometown, and the people were still at the house from when I moved out, and they said they remember that, oh, you guys forgot your hula hoops, and that was like 20 years later. So it was funny. So I have definitely remember hula hoops.
In Cuba, Soviet Russia threatened to deploy nuclear weapons within easy reach of the coast of USA, and President Kennedy blockaded Cuba to prevent delivery of the missiles.
Yo tengo una barba peluda. El comunismo es el futuro.
America launched the high-flying U-2 spy plane to run photo reconnaissance of the Soviet Union. The reconnaissance was initially successful, but eventually became a PR nightmare for the US when a U-2 piloted by Gary Powers was shot down over the Soviet Union.
Here's some more footage uncovered by our research team.
See, my thoughts on Psycho. I remember my parents telling me it was like the scariest movie they had ever seen. It's like, oh, don't see it, don't see it. And I know, when I finally saw it, I thought it was one of the greatest movies I ever saw. The way it was, the film and everything. I definitely almost compare every horror movie like that to Psycho. The way it was filmed, Hitchcock and everything. And I think it's probably one of the best movies ever filmed.
On June 30th, 1960, the Republic of the Congo became an independent nation from Belgium, with Joseph Kasavubu as president and Patrice Lumumba as prime minister.